Now, with these, I can only go like this far. No. Drop these in real quick here. Yep. Just doing a test here to see if those out there in Facebook Live Nation can hear me. If you could put something into the comments as whether or not you can hear me, I'd appreciate it. Testing 1, 2, 3. Test, test. Can you hear me? All right, I got the thumbs up. Well, I've got 7 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest Facebook Live this is Superintendent Brad Bergstrom from Sauk Rapids Rice Public Schools coming to you. Happy New Year to everybody. This is the first one for 2022, and thank you for taking the time this evening to listen in. Time to try and answer questions and getting your thoughts in regards to questions that you might have with what's going on in the district. For those who have not attended before, welcome. Thank you again for taking your time to be here tonight. For those that have been here before, this will be a little bit of a repeat, but just in case there's somebody new, I want to make sure I go through and kind of explain how this works here. So the purpose of these Facebook Live meetings that we have here is really for me to be able to try and answer questions that you might have about what's going on in the district. How this process is going to work is with me who will be checking the comment section. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them into the comment section, and they will, the people that are here with me will take those questions, write them down, and then I'll try to answer them live here for you. If I can't answer the question, I will certainly do some digging, and then at the next Facebook Live meeting, which will be in February, I'll certainly try to bring back the answer at that moment in time or the next time that we meet. So again, if you have questions, please put them into the comment section, and we'll be monitoring that and taking those questions. They'll put them onto a post-it for me, and then I'll try to answer them live as we're going through this. I may not be able to answer all the questions again, but we'll do our very best to try and do so. So for some time, when we have been doing these Facebook Live meetings, there has been some who have used this as an opportunity to express their views on a variety of different things. Sometimes they have some issues or concerns with yours truly sitting right here, and that's okay. Unfortunately, this is not the format to do that. This is really a question and answer section, and the purpose of it is for me to answer questions. And I have gotten feedback that people don't want to come and listen in because of some of the rhetoric that's coming from those who are out in Facebook Live Nation. And so I will ask, this is a school district function. So I will ask that you keep that rhetoric and put that somewhere else. Certainly feel free to give me a call tomorrow or on Friday or at any point if you have some questions or concerns in regards to things that really shouldn't be in the land of social media. So the last couple of times it's actually gotten much better, and I've been sharing that with people who have expressed some reservations about it, about coming in and watching this. So I appreciate that help and would appreciate greatly if we would continue to do so. And again, I understand that sometimes the answers that I give are not the most popular and people would like to have something different, but this is not the format to be expressing those views. Certainly give me a call. I'm sure there's places out there in the land of the internet where you can post those thoughts, just not here, and we'd greatly appreciate your cooperation with that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I've got the first question here. So this question is our children going to possibly move to online, and if so, what does that look like? So I'm going to take this question and I'm going to kind of adjust it just a little bit. So the question is, are children going to possibly move to online? Since the beginning of the school year, that's always been a possibility. One of the things that we are constantly doing is looking at what our data says and adjusting our safe learning plan if it's necessary. So that's not a today thing, that's not a tomorrow thing, that's been since the beginning of the year, and we have managed up to this point to be able to keep everybody coming to school. Our numbers, while at certain points of the year have been a little higher than what we'd like them to see in the community as well as with our students, they have lately been relatively low, and so we're very thankful for that. There is some movement of those numbers moving back up again. I'm sure people are aware of the newest variant that's out there and the concerns with that. So again, we monitor that data every single day, and if we need to adjust, we'll certainly take a look at what our data is telling us. But at this moment in time, there's no movement. In fact, our numbers again are low, but again, they are starting to creep back up again. So anything that we can do to try and use some of those mitigation strategies that we have in place, we'll continue to do those. And just being wise, if you're in, one of the biggest things that we can do to help with this is that if we have one or more of the more common symptoms or two or more of the less common symptoms, if that's the case, get yourself tested and stay home. If you're sick, don't come to school. Again, there's this Midwestern value of we're gonna power through if we're not feeling very good, and it really is counterproductive to what it is that we want to try and be able to do, and that is to keep everybody safe. So again, doing those things can be very, very helpful. And to the next question is, if we had to move to online, what's that going to look like? And what I can share with you is that it will not be what we had last year, where we took, in essence, a classroom day and recreated that time frame, everything in a virtual setting. And there are some really good things that have happened with that, and we'll take that as we begin to move forward if we have to move there, which I hope that we don't. But it will not be exactly the same. And it comes back to the Department of Education has made it very clear that distance learning, as we've done it, is not the requirement. And it's not there anymore. The online learning, which is a little bit more of office hour type piece or students doing some work on their own, we might see more of that small group pieces, but it will not be a repeat of what we had with distance learning last year. But we also know that there needs to be some guidance, and it's not just turn students loose and let them do what they need to do. We know there needs to be some opportunities to connect with teachers. There needs to be some opportunities. Exactly what we had last year with distance learning. Next question here is, any idea if school will be late tomorrow? One of the most interesting decisions that a superintendent has to make is the decision with weather. And what's really interesting with this is that everybody knows that the weather people do the very best job that they can to predict the weather. And oftentimes that prediction doesn't come true. It might be warmer, it might be colder, it might be windier, less windy, and we all just kind of accept that as, yep, that's just the nature of how it works predicting the weather. Superintendents, when it comes to making calls on school, have to react to that, and we're expected to be 100% right every time with that, and it just doesn't work that way. So at this point, what I can share with you, so that's the interesting conundrum that superintendents have. And I can tell you in the 6 years that I've been a superintendent and making those kinds of calls, most of the time, weather people are right and we get it right, and it's in making sure that the safety of our staff and our students is at the forefront of that, understanding that for some of our students, the need to be in school every day for academic pieces, for social emotional pieces, for getting food, those kinds of things is really important. Again, one of the things that we try to do is keep school going as much as we possibly can while maintaining that safety. So what I look for when it gets to weather is looking at a couple of things. When it gets to the cold, it's really at that temperature of 35 below and colder, and it's not a hard and fast rule. That's when you really start to pay attention as to, is this going to work for us or not? We've got good buses, we've got people who that drive them that do an excellent job of keeping everybody safe. We have backup plans in case there's a struggle with the bus, but at 35 below ambient temperature is really what you look at. And as far as the wind chill goes, it's when you start to get into that wind chill warning. Because what happens is that skin exposure, when you start to get into that wind chill warning, moves from about 30 minutes of time till there's an issue to now there's 10 minutes of time. And so one of the things that we do is that becomes one of those guidelines that you take a look at. So tomorrow, right now, and I looked here at about 6:45, the temperature, the wind chill, it's going to be in the mid to upper 20s below zero, but it is not getting into that wind chill warning piece. And I always remind parents and guardians that when it comes to the safety and well-being of your child, and if they ride the bus, for example, or they drive a vehicle, that is up to you as a parent. If you don't think it's safe, that you can certainly keep your child or your children at home that day, and we will honor and respect that. Ultimately, you are the decision maker. We will establish the guidelines for if school is going to be 2 hours late, if it's going to be canceled, or if we're going to get out early. And ultimately, it looks like tomorrow it's going to be cold, but it is not going to be into that danger of a wind chill warning or the danger with the cold. So unless some things change, I'll be up early tomorrow morning like I was this morning, checking things out. I generally don't like to make a call on the morning of because I know it creates issues, and particularly for our elementary families, because when the decision is made early in the morning, now what am I going to do if it's a 2-hour delay or school is canceled? How is that going to work for my family and I? But at this point, it appears that while it will be cold, it is not going to be to that danger point beyond what we might expect, because we live in Minnesota and sometimes it gets cold and sometimes it snows. So at this point, my best guess is that school will be running on time tomorrow. So the next question is really around this idea of, so Superintendent Bergstrom, when it comes time to make a weather decision, what's the process that you use, or how does that happen? And I will tell you, it does not operate in a vacuum. And there's a number of different moving parts that are incorporated with this. So number one is that St. Cloud Public Schools, Sartell St. Stephen, and Sauk Rapids Rice, we work together in terms of what that's going to look like. So it involves having conversations with the other superintendents in the district. What are you hearing? What are your thoughts? Number two, it involves conversations with transportation. Troy Voigt and I, who he is one of the owners of the bus company that we contract with, we have conversations the night before. We have conversations early in the morning. And so at 4:30 this morning, I was having conversations with him in regards to, as he's out and driving around in various areas of our district, what's it looking like? Are buses able to move? Again, sometimes roads are not ideal. I had an email this morning with somebody said, that these roads were dangerous. Well, I don't get to tell the county or the city how and when they're going to plow their roads. They do an excellent job and do the very best that they can. And the piece that where I'm going at with this is that the other part that I do is I get out and I go drive around. And I have a 4-wheel drive pickup, but I think that that's a little bit, gives me an advantage that, well, you can drive around your 4-wheel drive. What about in a car? So I also have a car. And so I'm out driving around at 4 o'clock in the morning, checking where those roads are at. And this morning, people would have to have slowed down, but you could make it through there without too much difficulty. And again, sometimes road conditions are not ideal. There may be a particular spot in the district that maybe is a little bit more suspect than the others. But again, we do our very best to cover all of the areas within our district. So, and by looking at what the roads are like, we are having conversations as superintendents in terms of what this is going to look like. And then the other thing is I'm out driving around to check and see what it's like. And again, because roads are not perfect doesn't mean that we cancel or delay school. It really is this idea of, is there an inordinate risk? Can buses not get around? That's part of that decision making. And it's not exactly the same thing every time, because sometimes it's windy, sometimes it's pure cold, and sometimes there's snow. And each of those requires a different look, but it's kind of the same general formula of communication early in the morning and the night before, getting out, driving around, see what those roads are like, and then having communication and talking with other superintendents. Staying on the school closing theme, is Digital Learning Day possible instead of making it up? And great question, and the answer to that is based upon the calendar that was approved by the school board, the answer to that question is no. That we will, the very first day that we have a snow day, or a day in which school is canceled. Because sometimes, and I've been in a district where there are things that happen that are not related to snow, but you still have to cancel school. If you have a loss of power, those kinds of things can certainly generate some times when you got to close school. So the first one is nobody has to make anything up. Okay, when we get to numbers 2, 3, and 4. Okay, that's when we look at the calendar and some of those days that we would normally have off, we will be having school on those days. And that was clearly outlined and articulated at the beginning of the year, or when the calendar was approved actually last spring. And so when we get to days 5 and beyond, then we can move to what we call e-learning, or the digital learning piece. But for this year, and as for right now, there is not that option when it comes to making up days if we move beyond the 1. Next question is, how do I decide when there is a late start? So one of the key pieces with a late start is are things going to improve at some point during the morning hours? So for example, maybe it is a wind chill warning until 7:30 in the morning. Usually that time period, about a half an hour before the sun comes up to about a half an hour after the sun comes up, that's generally your coldest time period. So if things are going to improve and the wind chill warning is going to go away, then we may look to have a late start. It might be something where you got a lot of snow and we might need some time to allow the plows from the city and from the county to be able to start opening up those major roads so that we can travel down them. And sometimes they just need a little bit more time. That might be a late start. Ultimately, where you go with a late start is that something is happening that's going to change, and it also allows you, to then start loading students on buses in the daylight versus doing it in the dark. And so when you have that 2-hour late start, it moves everything back from loading kids on buses starting at 6:30 in the morning to 8:30. Sun's up, things look a whole lot different. And oftentimes that can be the piece that you need in order to get students safely onto buses and then get them to school safely. And so that's kind of the criteria that are going to be used. So are things just at that time when you're starting to load kids onto buses, is it not a good time to do that? Will things get better in a relatively quick time period? And does loading them in the daylight change and make it safer versus loading when it's dark out? And those are some of the things that you think about when you're going to be asking for or making the recommendation for a late start versus coming to school on time versus canceling school for the day. Now, it's not on this question, but the other piece that oftentimes I get asked is, how do you make the decision for if you're going to release early? First of all, I don't like to do that. It is, many of our bus drivers have other things that they do because driving a bus is not a full-time position. They might have a job somewhere else, and asking them to leave that job and come back early, it does create a hardship for them. But really what it means is we would do a early release if the conditions would be as such that it would be safer to pick kids up and get them home earlier than we would if it's at the end of the day. A couple of the things that come into play with that is not necessarily the temperature, because generally there's not a lot of fluctuation with that, but it could be wind and it could be snow. And so that's kind of what drives those things, and it's mostly snow that is going to be accumulating and falling, and we want to get students home earlier than waiting till at the end of the day. But again, it's not something we want to do. I want to try and avoid that. Once I get kids here, this is the safest place for them to be, and we know that sending kids home early also causes a lot of consternation for families, particularly for our younger students, because a parent or a guardian might be at home, but they're not there until 2 o'clock. And so if you send somebody home early, that means that somebody's got to be there to make sure that that child is being watched and taken care of, because we certainly don't want to leave somebody outside when it's cold outside especially. Just a gentle reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the comments section, and we'll go ahead and try to answer those. I've got a couple of things that I also want to make sure that I share with you tonight. And the first one is that we're going to talk about kindergarten registration for the class of 2035. While that sounds like a long ways away, that's our kindergarten class that will be starting next year in the fall of 2022. So today, letters went out to families that have students who are kindergarten eligible to come. We have a census count that we get that kind of identifies students who are eligible to be starting kindergarten, but it's not always exactly 100% accurate. So if you have a kindergarten eligible age child and you don't get a letter in the next few days from us, please feel free to reach out to the district office. We'll get your contact information and we'll make sure that you get that letter. So a couple of things with kindergarten registration. Number one, on February 28th of 2022, we'll be doing kindergarten roundup, and we'll have kids coming into the buildings that they might be attending. The only one that will not be attending roundup in the same building that they'll be attending in the fall of the year, of course, is PV. We are looking forward to opening up that new elementary school in August of 2022. And so kindergarten roundup will be at what we affectionately call PV1. And kindergarten classes will be starting at PV in the fall of 2022. We start the 2022-2023 school year. So again, kindergarten roundup, which is an opportunity to come in and see the building and meet teachers and gather some insight, is going to be on Monday, February 28th of 2022. You can begin registering for kindergarten online. You can start doing that today. And in the letter that's coming out, there's information that will help you to understand where you can go and online to do that, and also the information that you're going to need to have. You can also do that during kindergarten roundup. We appreciate as a school district when families register sooner rather than later. One of the things that we enter into at this time of the year is budget planning for, in this case, for 22-23. And knowing sooner rather than later how many kindergarten students we have certainly helps us with planning for staffing needs at the kindergarten level. Now, if you have some questions about the registration process or which school am I supposed to be at, please feel free to reach out to the building that you think your child is going to be going to, and they'll be happy to answer your question. If you have a question about, hey, I didn't get the information, or is my child actually eligible to attend kindergarten next year, please feel free to call the district office and we'll get you connected with Dr. Jenny Bushman, and we'll get those questions answered for you as well. So just to recap, information has gone out today with letters for families for kindergarten registration. We're having kindergarten roundup on Monday, February 28th, 2022, and that you can begin registering today for kindergarten for 22-23. Information is in that letter that's coming out, and it'll also tell you what information it is that you need to have. And if you have questions about the registration process or a form, make sure to reach out to your child's school they'll be going to. They'll be happy to answer your question. If it's about a kindergarten eligibility, or if you didn't get the letter, please reach out to us here at the district office, and Dr. Bushman will get back to you and with the answers to your questions. All right. I'm going to go ahead and jump to my next topic then, and that is on December 27th, this Centers for Disease Control, commonly known as the CDC, announced that there was going to be some changes in the quarantine piece and the isolation piece in terms of recommendations for the time period with that. Time periods have been shortened in regards to this, and just as a gentle reminder is that quarantine is defined as those who may have had a close contact with somebody who has tested positive, and isolation is I have tested positive in the time period that I have to stay home. Now, the process for identifying who can come back early and all those pieces, it's not a very clean process. There's a lot of if-then. If this happens, then that happens. And what we have learned just recently is that it appears as if those guidelines will qualify for the school setting as well. Now, the Minnesota Department of Health, as well as the CDC, is saying that you don't have to follow these. The Minnesota Department of Health is saying that they will come out with guidelines for in terms of what this means. And as a school district, we have been following those MDH guidelines very closely, commonly known as the decision tree. It has been the process that we have utilized since the fall of 2020 in determining quarantine and isolation guidelines and expectations. It is hoped that next week we will have from the Department of Health guidelines for us as schools so we can communicate that out to families. My number one concern is to make sure that the safety of our students and our staff is being followed. And I mentioned earlier there's a lot of if-then statements with this, and it's a little bit convoluted and a little bit difficult to understand. It's not as simple as, oh, if I get diagnosed with COVID, I sit for 5 days and then I can come back to school. Just, it does not quite work that way. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to follow that Department of Health decision tree. We will look for that guidance to come, and as soon as we get that, we'll communicate that out and let families and let our staff know as well what those new guidelines are. And if people qualify, the opportunity to come back sooner is certainly something that we will put into play. But we will wait to get those guidelines from the Department of Health to make sure that they're being implemented properly. And again, as I said, there's a lot of these if-then statements. So we will follow the decision tree. And I just got an email here a couple of hours ago saying that they're hoping for this coming week, that early in the week, that there's going to be guidelines for us to follow. So the next question is, if COVID cases rise, will a mask mandate be implemented? We have established a stages document, and in that stages document, we have indicated there may be a point in time where we need to move to utilizing a face covering as a part of our mitigation strategies. As I mentioned earlier on, we're watching the data for the district, for our community, for the region on a daily basis. And if our data warrants a change with our safe learning plan, with a change to our stages document, we certainly will do that. In past Facebook Live meetings, I've been asked, where's the threshold? What's that magic number? It's not a magic number. It really is, are we able to staff? Are we seeing spread happening in the buildings? Is it at a grade level? Is it a class level? Is it a building level? It's really asking a lot of questions, and it's not just purely based on, looks like the numbers in the community have gone up. Well, what age group is that at? Is it implementing? Is it having impact, I should say, with students that come to school here? If, for example, if in our youngest age category, there's numbers are going up, but it's being impacted with our 2 and 3 year olds, not our 4, 5, and 6 year olds, okay, that's going to look different for us as a school. So again, it's really breaking that data down. And if the data warrants us making a change with our safe learning plan, making a change with what stage we're in, we will certainly do that. And please know that there's a lot of time spent each day looking at that data to make sure that we know where things are at and asking the questions necessary to know that should we stay where we're at or do we need to make a change. The next question I have, is there a way to help traffic when the high school lets out at the end of the day with teenage drivers? Quite dangerous. So I've had the opportunity to be a part of a number of different districts in my career. In fact, I spent 9 years as a high school principal. And one of the things that always causes a tremor is when the day lets out and students are leaving and making sure that good decisions are made. I was a teenager once too, and I can admit that I probably always didn't practice the safest driving. You might be talking with friends or not paying attention, and that's when accidents can happen. So what we're doing, now I'll give you a little bit of a heads up with this, is that there is going to be a traffic study that is going to be done looking at Mayhew Lake Drive. And as a part of that, we've asked to have the high school and the way that we, when we let out at the end of the day, is there, as a part of this traffic study, is there a better way for us to have students exit, have parents exit, have buses exit, and that's both coming and leaving at the end of the day, more so with parents and buses than with our students. And so that is being studied and looked at because we want to make sure that people are safe. And I will tell you, I've had to go and talk to a few drivers over my time as being the superintendent here, and it hasn't been kids. It's been the adults. And so there's a lineup of vehicles that start to happen before the day ends here at the high school. And ultimately, when everybody is patient and follows the expectations that we have, it can be a very nice orchestrated departure, arrival and departure from the high school parking lot. There's a number of kids that drive. We've got more parents today than I've ever seen in my time in education, bringing their students to school each day, which is fine. But as we create more congestion at the high school in particular, I want to be really clear. Yep, we have a lot of teenagers that are leaving at about that time, but we also have a lot of adults here, and it's incumbent upon all of us to just exercise that caution, that little extra paying attention. And we are engaging with the city and the county on a traffic study to really determine, are there some traffic patterns that we should be having at the end of the day in particular to help exit the high school and get people on their way home in the safest manner possible. Okay, the next item that I have here that I want to talk with you a little bit about is that I've gotten a couple of questions from people in the community in regards to OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, in regards to something that's been in the news quite regularly lately, and that is the Emergency Temporary Standard. The Emergency Temporary Standard, in a nutshell, is a requirement for businesses that employ more than 100 employees, which Sauk Rapids Rice Public Schools does, that there are some expectations in regards to vaccines, testing, and also face coverings. I want to be really clear, this is for the adults. It's for anybody who is employed by the district, and if you get a paycheck, even if it's just one time in the year, you are considered to be an employee. So this is an adult piece that is being discussed. Right now, the Supreme Court of the United States is scheduled to hear arguments on Friday, January 7th. There is an expected short turnaround with the decision, and the decision could be to continue with the decision that, yep, it's going to be implemented, or the decision could be made to stay it, which means that it's going to stop. And we need to be doing some planning with that, and we've had some communication with our staff already on this, and we'll continue to do so. There'll be another round of communication that'll be coming out next week to give everybody an update where it's at. But as you're hearing about this in the media, please know and understand that the OSHA ETS is for adults only. It does not apply to students, in this case, that are going to school here. Okay, I got a couple other items that I think I'm going to bring up here while I'm waiting for something that I think is really, really important. And you know, earlier on in the session tonight, the question was asked, you know, are we going to look to do anything different with going to online learning with COVID, because of COVID? And I answered that question, but I think there's another piece that's really important with this. And that piece that's important is really the reminder for our families to be prepared for things to change, and sometimes those changes are going to happen very quickly. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of families putting together plans so that if something changes, and what we've learned with COVID is we generally don't get, you know, 3 or 4 days notice. We don't get a week's notice. When it happens very quickly. And I was having a conversation the other day with some superintendents who have experienced transportation, for example. They ran into some issues with that. There just wasn't enough bus drivers due to a variety of different reasons for them to be able to run their normal routes. And they put a plan into place, but it really got me to thinking about, you know, we've got a wonderful transportation company. They do a great job of moving our kids back and forth every day and doing so in a safe manner. And we're very happy to be partnering with them on this. But things can happen. And I know that back in December, we had some times where the number of drivers that are available was getting pretty low. They have management that's working. They have ownership that's driving buses. And again, they're doing everything they can. But there could come a time when we don't have enough drivers. And it might be a route or two that might be impacted, and it could be for a very temporary, it might be just for the day, it might be for a period of days, but it's generally not going to happen where we're going to get a week's notice so we can notify everybody, and here's where it's going to be at. It's more than likely going to happen at 5 o'clock in the morning, and there's going to be some communication that's going to go out and let people who are impacted by this know that this route is going to be delayed, and it might be a half an hour, it might be 45 minutes, it might be an hour, whatever it might be. And families that ride the bus need to be aware of, what am I going to do if the route is going to be delayed? Because that is definitely a possibility. Okay? I also think that as we look at what we do, whether it be with a classroom or at the grade level or the building level, sometimes things happen. We experienced it a year ago where on a Sunday afternoon, we needed to move Pleasant View Elementary School into, in that time, it was distance learning. And it's Sunday afternoon that this is happening. So again, you don't get a lot of time to plan for that. So at the end of the day, 2 requests that I will have for you as parents and guardians with your children to be thinking about and really putting some thought behind this and a plan into place. Number 1 is that I would like for you to make sure that you go check in Skyward your contact information to make sure that it's accurate. This is something that we regularly send information out to families. Hey, check your Skyward piece, check to see where that's at, because inside of Skyward is information that includes your email, it includes a cell phone number, because when we communicate, that's going to come via an email and or it's going to come in the form of a text message that will give you to a link that will help you to understand what it is that we're going to be doing differently. And if that information that's in there is not accurate, you are not going to get that information. So I'm going to ask that in the coming days, please take the time to go into the Skyward, our student information system, where our parent guardian information is at, and double check it to make sure that it's right. Don't assume that it is. Don't make any sort of I'll take care of this later. Take care of it now. And if you are not sure how to get in to do that, please call the school. We'll walk you through that process and help you to get there, because again, when it comes time for us to communicate, if it's 5 o'clock in the morning and there's a bus route that's going to be delayed, that information is going to come via the email or the text. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we've gone in, checked our information, and make sure that it's accurate, because we want to make sure that people are made aware. And so that's the one piece that I want to make sure that we have you do. And by doing that, it will allow us to make sure that if there's a school change or if there's a bus change, that you're going to get that information. And then if you thought ahead, what does it mean if it's going to be delayed with the bus for 45 minutes? Am I bringing my child in? Is it something that the neighbor's going to stop and pick them up? Or I'm going to drop them off at the neighbor's place and they're going to ride the bus there? Whatever your plan might be, I'll ask that you talk about that and everybody understand what it's going to be. I'm not saying that it is going to happen, but I think we have to plan for in case it might happen. And again, when it's 70 degrees outside and the birds are chirping and the sun's shining, it looks a lot different than when it's 27 below with the wind chill factor and the bus isn't there. So please, please go to Skyward, check out and make sure that your information that's in there is accurate. And then the other part to that is please, please, please talk with your children about what that plan is going to look like. So if that has to happen, it's not a mad scramble for everybody, but we all know what it's going to be. It's why we practice fire drills here. It's why we practice some of the other drills that we do here. It's because when we have to do something that is impacting us, we know what it is we need to do, and it's not a surprise. So again, any help with that would be greatly appreciated. And again, if you're not sure how to get into Skyward, please reach out to the school that your child goes to, and we'll help you out with that. Because again, making sure that that information is accurate is critically important, because our communication is going to be via that text or via that email, so that you know what's going to be taking place. And so again, checking in and making sure that that information is accurate in Skyward, which is where we get our information from, is critically important. All right. Looking at the time here, we still got a little bit left here, so I'm going to bring up one more item, and if we don't have any other questions, we'll go ahead and close it down a little bit early tonight. The other piece that I wanted to talk with you about is our website. And so, about a year ago, we went through the process of updating our website. And if you've gone there in the last 24 hours plus, you may have noticed that sometimes you can't get into certain areas, or maybe you can't get in at all. We were made aware of this, and it is a provider issue. And quite honestly, we were under the impression that things were going to be up and running here sometime earlier today. And unfortunately, that did not happen. However, tonight we have learned that they have found the problem, they have solved the problem, and they will start bringing on websites one at a time. So it may be a little bit more time for us. We don't have an exact timeline for when it's going to come back online, but please know that we were aware of it. Apologize for the inconvenience with that. Again, sometimes you could get into certain areas and sometimes you couldn't. Oftentimes what people were seeing was areas that they had saved from before in the past, which if nothing has changed, it's there, and it's good for you to know that, and it's not a huge deal. But we were aware. Apologize for the inconvenience. It is a provider issue, not on our end, and they have solved the problem, and they are now starting to bring websites back in one by one, and hopefully ours will be up and running by the early morning. I'm going to look to the two people who are looking at questions. I got the thumbs up that that seems to be it for questions for tonight. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here tonight and listen in on this. I appreciate the questions. We as a school and a community are linked together. Whatever we can do to keep everybody safe and keep everybody coming to school, any efforts to do that would be greatly appreciated. As our community goes, so do we as a school. Again, thank you for your time tonight. Our next Facebook Live meeting will be on Wednesday, February 2nd. Look forward to having a chance to answer your questions then. In the meantime, take care, have a great evening, and go Storm.